Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have another spectacular show for you today, and I think we're eager to get to it, so let's do just that. The question on our minds is, what did Dr. Anthony Fauci know, and when did he know it? Now, if you ask the House Select Committee on COVID, the former director knew about a cache of emails revealing information about lab leak involvement early on, perhaps, and did his best to hide it. Now, the former director of the National Institutes of Health, Anthony Fauci, is under renewed scrutiny after David Morens, Fauci's former senior advisor, testified Wednesday about these damning emails concerning early stage origins of COVID, some of which may have implicated Fauci. Now, Republicans and Democrats on the panel exhaustively questioned him concerning the email correspondence that he had with multiple people, most notably Peter Daszak, head of EcoHealth Alliance, who worked very closely with the Wuhan lab. It was revealed that Morens was not transparent and even recruited help from NIH's FOIA office to help him evade records requests and delete emails. Chairman Brad Wenstrup questioned his communication with then-director of NIAID. Here's that exchange.
On April 21, 2021, you wrote, "I can either send stuff to Tony, Fauci, on his private email or hand it to him at work or at his house." Did you ever send information related to COVID-19 to Dr. Fauci's personal email?
I don't remember if I did. I may have, but I certainly told him some things that he asked me to tell him about the situation with Peter.
Thank you.
Here's a few highlights from the hearing in which both Democrats and Republicans grilled Morens. Let's watch.
Sir, I believe you have lied here today to us, to Congress, when you say, "Oh, I didn't know this. I didn't intentionally use my Gmail." Are you kidding me?
You appear to have frequently denigrated and dismissed the gravity of this deductive process.
Dr. Morens, did you ever have any conversations with Dr. Fauci regarding EcoHealth?
Well, the ones you just mentioned, I don't have any recollection of that.
No recollection?
No recollection, no. One time in a face-to-face meeting, he referred or alluded to some stuff that was in the press. I don't even think he said what it was, but it was about, I assumed it was about Peter's grants and press reports about it, and the ending of the grant. And I said to him, sort of out of the blue, guessing what he was really thinking, I said to him, "Tony, I know you would have never been involved in getting rid of that grant." And he didn't respond. He just sort of looked at me.
All eyes will be on Congress June 3rd when Dr. Fauci is supposed to testify. But now, here to unpack yesterday's hearing and what is next is U.S. Right to Know reporter Emily Kopp. Emily, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Emily, how would you characterize the biggest sort of takeaways from yesterday's hearing?
Well, look, I think the bottom line here is that when COVID first emerged from Wuhan, this American-Chinese collaboration on high-risk virology on coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology immediately generated intrigue. And what has come to light in the time since then is that the people with the most in-depth knowledge about that collaboration and the most leverage to obtain more information from Wuhan instead went into action to obscure what they knew. I think the biggest takeaway from yesterday is, that there were systems in place at NIAID, Tony Fauci's institute at NIH, to evade records retention and public transparency law, apparently to conceal what people in Fauci's office knew about a connection between NIAID and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So David Morens is this interesting character because he is sort of at the nexus of Fauci and the Wuhan lab. Morens was an aide to Fauci for over 2 decades. He described his duties at NIAID as being Fauci's, quote, utility infielder. And Morens, for nearly just as long, has been friends and drinking buddies with Peter Daszak, who subcontracted NIAID funds to the Wuhan lab. So while Fauci has downplayed the grant funding to Wuhan as relatively minuscule, it's clear that there was this direct connection between Fauci's inner circle and that research. And so the new revelations from yesterday include the fact that Fauci himself was concerned about this connection and what people would think about it. And according to the new subpoenaed emails and this testimony, he advised Morens to contact him on his private email address and his private phone relating to the Wuhan research. So that could further implicate Fauci directly in concerns about concealed emails and an evasion of the law.
Yeah, one of the emails that got mentioned yesterday, this is an email that Morens wrote, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe." Safe from what? Safe from people asking which questions?
Precisely. Safe from public accountability, transparency. There was also an allegation during the testimony yesterday that the head of the FOIA office at NIAID would advise that they use strategic misspellings because FOIA requests often use keywords. And if you misspell the keyword slightly, then your FOIA won't produce certain potentially incriminating emails. I think it's important to tie this back to public health too, and the implications for the public. This isn't just a sort of insular scandal about emails. You know, they were concealing information at a time when the pandemic was sort of at its peak, and when there was an opportunity to get more data from the Wuhan lab. There was this request from another office within NIH for Daszak to obtain key genomic data from the Wuhan Institute of Virology to leverage his collaboration there to get information for the public. And what Morens, apparently with the help of Fauci directly, accomplished is allowing Daszak to maintain his NIH funding without having to produce that information for the government or for we the public.
To put just a really fine point on this, when Robbie asks what, safe from what is the nature of what one could expect to be in the emails that they were trying to avoid having to disclose? Are we talking about knowledge of inadequate safety protocols at the Wuhan lab, or something perhaps even more serious, even more nefarious than that, about knowledge about the origins of COVID and who individually or collectively are responsible?
I think that is still an open question. So it is possible that the emails that they were concerned about concealing just sort of implicated the fact that there was this connection between NIAID, the US government, and Fauci, and very controversial coronavirus gain of function work in Wuhan. That is sort of telling enough. And these emails were being sent in 2020 and 2021 for the most part. This was at the height of Fauci fever. And so I think even just that connection threatened to undermine the idea that the lab origin hypothesis was a conspiracy theory, but also Fauci's cult of personality. Or there could have been emails with direct implications for the origins of COVID, with information relevant to the research that was going on there. So I think it sort of remains to be seen, and I think the committee has more work to do. I think there is an opportunity for them to obtain more information through this new revelation that Fauci was sending emails on a private Gmail, and so maybe that will shed some light on that.
When Fauci testifies, and I'm sure there will be a lot of political grandstanding by the people asking him questions, because he's a political kind of punching bag at this point, at least for the right. But if a legislator really wanted to get to the bottom of this and really better understand what was being hidden from the public, what sort of questions does an investigator should really be asking of Dr. Fauci?
I think what he knew and why he made this decision to talk about research at the center of intrigue about the origins on a private email would be illuminating. But I think when you get to the core of the issue, why 20 million people are dead, the most important thing that NIH can do and that Fauci can do is leverage their resources to look in their own database. NIH hosts one of the biggest databases of viral sequences in the world. And they could look at that data and that metadata to see if someone was researching something like SARS-CoV-2 at the time the pandemic emerged. And before Morens' testimony yesterday, there was another hearing a week or so ago where the former acting director of NIH, Lawrence Tabak, testified, and he said NIH is not an investigative agency, but NIH is also not a public health response agency, yet Fauci led the pandemic response. And so I think there is some evasion of their responsibility to turn over every stone in order to get down to the bottom of this, the essence of the question, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? And so, like you said, Robbie, I think there's going to be a lot of grandstanding and a lot of politics, but we saw yesterday that this has become a bipartisan issue. I think faced with this brazen sort of corruption, even Democrats got on board with saying that something is wrong here. And so if we really want to get to the core of the issue, the substance, that is what I would ask if I was
right.
a person on this.
And obviously, Democrats participated in the decision. It was Biden's HHS that decided to stop working with Eco Health Alliance, stop making grant money available to them just a few days ago or last week. So this is this is not at all a partisan issue. I also wonder, it's on a little different thread. I'm still wondering whether we can ever get the intelligence or more of an idea of what the intelligence is that has led the Energy Department to make its conclusion. Obviously, over a year ago now, I think the Wall Street Journal had reported about those initial 6 scientists at the Wuhan lab, and I wonder if there's solid information about that is kept top secret or something, that is why some government agencies have made that conclusion, or whatever it is. If they have some information that way, probably that's not something to be asked of Fauci. But now that there more and more Democrats seem to be on board with Republicans like Rand Paul who've been asking these questions, really does seem like maybe there is a smoking gun out there that could be made available to the public, so we settle this question.
Absolutely, and it's sort of disturbing that there already has been bipartisan agreement that intelligence should be made public to the American people, and yet the intelligence community has flouted the law and not released it. And so I'm not really sure where we go from there, but I think that says some unsettling things about how our government works, that the intelligence community can just flout the will of the American people, even when it is overwhelmingly bipartisan.
Yeah, overwhelmingly passed by both parties and signed by Joe Biden, and the intelligence community still didn't release it.
Right, exactly. There is a little bit of hope in that the committee obtained full unredacted versions of the State Department cables that we had obtained via FOIA, but were heavily redacted, that hopefully could shed light on some of the issues that you're talking about, Robbie, but remains to be seen. I haven't seen them yet. So,
well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.